Imagine dedicating your entire professional life to the pursuit of absolute logic. Numbers, rigid control.
Everything in its place.
Exactly. You've successfully engineered this career that should give you maximum security, maximum predictability. But then what happens when that meticulously built structure, your entire identity, really is demolished?
And not by something you can control, like a market crash or some mistake you made.
No, not at all. It's demolished by two things hitting you at the exact same time. A completely false professional accusation and a devastating family secret that you never even knew existed.
It's the ultimate failure of your internal systems. I mean, when someone like Kate Powell, whose whole life is this intricate defense mechanism against chaos, gets hit by the raw, unpredictable reality of inherited history and, a criminal framing, the psychological cost is just immediate and profound.
It is.
It triggers this forced reevaluation of every single metric she ever used to define herself.
And that's the crux of this deep dive. Our subject today is Kate Powell, a really high-achieving CPO who's on the absolute fast track to partnership at Biddle & Associates in Monterey, California.
A rising star.
Absolutely. And we're going to analyze this intense period of crisis where her professional world, which is rooted in facts and figures, just slams head-on into her family history, which is rooted in shame.
So our mission today is to really understand the mechanisms of that collision and the huge career pivot that resulted from it. And we've pulled together an amazing stack of sources for this. We've got internal memos from the Biddle firm, detailed police files from the embezzlement investigation that follows.
And we also have these incredibly intimate personal notes and interview transcripts from her closest family and friends, which give us this whole other layer.
They really do.
This material gives us an unprecedented look into the mind of someone who is forced to recognize that the life they built maybe it was built for all the wrong reasons. We aren't just tracing a plot here. We are dissecting the incredibly high cost of building an identity purely as a reaction to past trauma.
It's a powerful story.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning of the collapse. Kate's professional foundation. Before all this happens, before the scandal, she was, by all accounts, a statistical marvel of success.
Oh, completely. We're talking Harvard MBA, graduated early, and just 5 years into her career at Biddle & Associates, she was already actively, lobbying for a partnership.
She wasn't just waiting for it.
No, she was going for it.
Yeah.
And the records we have from Biddle are astonishing. She wasn't just good, she was relentless. She was generating over $200,000 in billing annually.
Which is a huge number.
It's a massive number. And the partner's notes on her specifically mention her ability to handle complex accounts without complaint. She was the definition of competence, but, and this is the key, competence was her shield, not just her skill.
A shield. I like that. And this professional competence was so deeply tied to her core belief system. The documents we looked at highlight her genuine, almost spiritual love of numbers.
Yes, because of their stoic and dependable consistency. That's the quote. She found this deep, deep comfort in the absolute truth of arithmetic.
2 and 2 always equals 4.
Exactly. That simple, rigid fact was the one thing in her life that could not and would not ever betray her.
And if you look at her working environment, you can see this obsession with control manifest physically, right?
So, absolutely. Her office, it had this lovely antique Chippendale knee-hole desk, but it was fundamentally functional. The sources specifically mention her pencils.
The pencils, yes.
Always sharpened like swords, and everything had its proper designated slot. This wasn't just about being neat, it was ritual. She created this micro-universe of perfect, sterile order to push back against the unknown disorder that she was carrying around inside.
Which brings us to the profound psychological engine driving all of this ambition. Her self-imposed mission to prove that she was not her father's daughter.
That's it?
Her whole professional ascent wasn't really about prestige or even just the money. It was a desperate generational fight against an inherited stain she didn't even fully understand.
That's the key psychological nugget right there.
Yeah.
She wasn't pursuing a CPA partnership because she loved corporate tax law. She was pursuing it because she desperately needed the validation that only that level of achievement could provide.
Right.
She felt this profound internalized shame about her father, Lincoln Powell, even though at this point she doesn't even know the exact history. So her ambition was just this massive psychological overcompensation. She needed the new office, she needed the salary, the prestige, all of it to silence that internal voice that feared she was somehow destined for failure. Or worse, for dishonesty.
She spent 2 decades pushing this hidden history down, believing, I guess, that if she just achieved enough external success, the taint would somehow vanish.
But the past is rarely so cooperative, is it?
Not at all.
No, it often arrives with what the notes call a capricious twist of fate. And the timing here was just the absolute worst. It's the middle of tax season. She's under a crushing workload.
Peak stress.
Peak stress. And that's when Stephen Tidings, an old acquaintance of her late father, just walks into her office at Biddle looking for a CPA.
And Kate, being polite and professional, she takes the time to chat with him. And Tidings, completely oblivious to the devastation he is about to unleash on her life.
He has no idea.
None. He just casually mentions the accusations, the charges, and the sorrow that her father died before he could make restitution for funds he had stolen or borrowed.
And for Kate, the shock wasn't just hearing the fact itself. It was realizing that this shame was a known, discussed reality for people outside of her protected little Templeton family bubble.
It was public knowledge, at least to some people.
Exactly. And our sources give us context for her father's actions. Tidings admitted that he had encouraged Lincoln Powell into a particularly bad real estate investment.
So Tidings himself felt some guilt.
A little bit, yeah. And this was after Lincoln had already depleted a lot of his capital in other failed ventures. So the father wasn't just struggling. He was, and this is a quote, desperate for money. And fundamentally, profoundly envious of the success of his cousins, the Templeton family.
So the motive for the theft wasn't pure malice. It was this toxic, consuming envy and a failure to succeed on his own terms.
It was desperation. And Kate suddenly understands that her father was a thief and a cheat who died in a car crash, which, ironically, meant he never actually faced justice for the crime.
And that car crash simultaneously made her an orphan and, by consequence, a Templeton, a member of the very family her father had spent his final years envying and trying to undermine.
The layers of irony are they're staggering.
So let's analyze the Templeton response, because this really defines Kate's entire world. They were, as the source says, drawn into the ugliness, but their response was immediate and totally protective.
Completely. They quietly paid off all of her father's missing funds in full. They took her in, and they always made sure to protect the child.
Which is a beautiful thing, but it also creates this deep complexity for Kate.
It does. Because on one hand, this was unconditional love and saving grace. But on the other, it cemented Kate's fear that she was a charity case, that her life was funded by the family your father had wronged.
So she was protected from the truth, but that very protection created this need for overcompensation.
Exactly. She felt like she had to succeed wildly to justify their investment in her, viewing their love almost as a transaction that required a return.
So the immediate physical and psychological fallout from what Tidings tells her is dramatic. We have reports that she felt physically ill. Her stomach was churning and knotted. She was needing constant headache and antacid pills for this burning in her stomach.
There was a sudden, violent manifestation of 20 years of suppressed anxiety.
And her first instinct, an instinct she's perfected over decades, was to just bury it again.
But the CPA in her, the part that needs order, it took over. She couldn't let it just hang there as this nebulous accusation, so she secretly hires a detective to pull the 20-year-old police and newspaper files.
This is the moment where her rigid control system tries to process the chaos. She needs data. She needs facts.
Even if consuming those facts, reading the confirming articles made her weep until she was exhausted. She was trying to categorize and file her shame, but the filing cabinet was now overflowing.
And she was already compromised, already physically and emotionally fractured, before the real professional crisis even began.
So if the discovery of her father's secret was the seismic event that shook her foundation, then the meeting with the Biddle partners was the entire structure just collapsing on top of her.
She's emotionally exhausted, she's terrified of public shame, and that's when she's called into Lawrence Biddle's conference room.
The timing couldn't be worse.
Let's walk through the mechanics of the accusation here, because the structure of the embezzlement was so ruthlessly precise. It was designed to point directly at Kate, the account executive.
Right, Lawrence Biddle Sr. and the other partners, they presented evidence of this systematic skimming operation.
So we should probably stop and analyze the technical sophistication of this fraud, because it's pretty clever. It centers on duplicate 1040 tax forms.
The primary documents for federal income tax returns, yeah. For multiple clients, like the Sunstream account, which is mentioned specifically, the firm had 2 different versions of the document.
Okay, go a little deeper into that process. How does that kind of skimming actually work, and why would the firm so quickly suspect their own rising star?
Well, it works by leveraging the trust and the structure of the CPA firm itself. The client receives a copy of their 1040 that shows the correct higher tax payment due. Let's say it's $7,648 in the Sunstream example. The client pays the firm that full amount.
Okay, makes sense.
However, the copy of the 1040 that's actually sent to the IRS, and this is key, the check drawn from Biddle's segregated client escrow account, is for a systematically lower amount.
So the difference between what the client paid to Biddle and what Biddle then paid to the IRS is the amount that's being skimmed off the top.
Exactly, and that escrow account is crucial here.
Okay.
In a big firm like Biddle's, the escrow account holds client funds temporarily for paying taxes, for investments, things like that. Since Kate had access to issue checks for that account, she could, in theory, draw a lower check for the IRS than what the client submitted and then pocket the remainder.
And the amounts were small enough to not raise immediate red flags.
Right, they ranged from about $1,200 up to $3,100. Small bites.
Yeah.
But they totaled up to $75,000.
And the circumstantial evidence against Kate was it was overwhelming, especially when you view it through Biddle's lens of self-protection.
It looked airtight. She was the primary account executive responsible for managing the filings. Her signature was on the alter documents. She had the access codes to the escrow accounts.
And then the partners deliver the final blow.
The motive. They pointed out she had just liquidated a huge portion of her personal funds to open her new boutique, Pretenses, which, in her words, took almost all my savings.
So, motive and opportunity, all perfectly aligned.
A neat little package.
We read the transcripts of her defense in that meeting, and they really capture her passionate denial. She says, "I've never taken a penny," and she highlights her 5 years of loyalty and dedication.
But she also, and this was maybe a mistake, she tried to play the Templeton card. She pointed out how implausible it was that she would be stealing, given her existing wealth and her powerful family connections.
Then that backfired.
Oh, spectacularly.
Ugh.
Lawrence Biddle responded by formally and very coldly, reminding her that part of her job included setting up offshore investments for clients, sometimes in places like the Caymans or Switzerland.
Ooh.
Yeah. And this detail, which in any other context is just high-level CPA work, suddenly sounded incredibly damning. The mere mention of bad investments and illicit funds.
Yeah.
It immediately, for everyone in that room, links back to her father's history of financial desperation.
The compounding stress was just monstrous, and it manifested physically. It quickly escalated beyond just, needing an antacid.
It really did. We have reports of her condition during this time, chronic use of Tums, Melanta, aspirin. She had this constant, agonizing, burning, gnawing sensation in her stomach.
A physical pain.
The physicians who were consulted initially diagnosed it as an ulcer on the boil, but Kate, in her mind, was consumed by the fear that it was cancer.
And you can see how her mind would go there.
Of course. It's a profound example of psychosomatic illness. I mean, the pressure cooker of her repressed shame and this new acute professional threat were literally eating her alive. The body was just reacting to the unresolvable stress. Dizziness, white and clammy skin, a rapid pulse, dangerously high blood pressure.
She couldn't fight it, and she couldn't flee from it. She was paralyzed specifically by the intersection of these two crises, and this is when Byron De Witt steps in.
Right. Byron finds her in the place she went to hide, alone in the cliffs overlooking the ocean, just desperately chewing Tums, absolutely terrified of having to face the Templetons with this news.
And he recognizes the level of collapse immediately.
He does. He sees she's in a state of emotional and physical collapse. And his intervention is incredibly strategic, even in this moment of pure crisis. He forces her to go to the hospital. But the critical detail is how he ensures she gets quick treatment without the full public exposure of being admitted.
He leverages his family connection.
He does. His mother, Dr. Byron De Witt, is a significant name in thoracic surgery. By using his mother's influence, he facilitates her treatment as an outpatient. They give her medication, an appointment for an x-ray, and she avoids the initial plan for a mandatory admission and observation.
It's a perfect example of that protective maneuvering that he does, which, while it's beneficial here, it definitely foreshadows the conflict they're going to have later over his need to handle her life.
Absolutely. But the true paralyzing agent here, it wasn't the embezzlement charge itself. It was the psychological threat it posed to the identity she had built on overcompensation.
Yes. The documents confirm her central terror. Fighting the charges would necessitate a full public investigation into her background, and inevitably, her father's past would be uncovered.
And the headline would write itself. Like father, like daughter. She feared that the Templetons, the people who would save her, would finally look at her and see the dishonesty of her father reflected back at them.
She believed she had earned their love through perfection. A public scandal, compounded by her father's history, meant she was at risk of losing the one thing she prized above all else, their belief in her worthiness.
The financial ruin, the jail time, all of that was secondary to the emotional betrayal she feared she represented.
So, with Kate forced onto sick leave and facing this public humiliation, the strengths of the Templeton support network becomes immediately apparent.
Oh, yeah. This relationship with Thomas, with Susan, her cousins Josh and Laura, and especially Ann Sullivan, the housekeeper, it wasn't just important, it was the central nervous system of her emotional survival.
And the reaction from the Templetons was just swift and non-negotiable. There was zero doubt, zero questioning of her innocence.
Not for a second. Laura, her cousin, immediately reacted with a rare show of temper, calling the accusation outrageous, insulting, and threatening an immediate lawsuit against Biddle for defamation. They just activated their massive family resources to protect her honor.
And then there's Ann Sullivan.
Anne, who served as a mother figure since Kate was orphaned, she focused entirely on her physical and emotional comfort. And we see these incredibly intimate details in the notes, bringing cucumber slices for her bloodshot, crying eyes, ensuring the linen was always lemon-scented, a smell Kate associated with home.
A small comfort, but a huge one in that moment.
A huge one. And obsessively tracking her meals, worried she was becoming a bag of bones. This tension was a physical anchor in a moment of pure disembodiment for her.
And Josh, the family's in-house lawyer and big brother figure, was equally effective. He immediately put Biddle on notice with a very credible threat of legal action.
They understood the power dynamics. They knew Biddle was trying to handle the problem quietly, and a high-profile libel suit would be the last thing that firm wanted.
But the most crucial moment of the entire crisis, I think, in terms of Kate's self-worth, came after that Biddle meeting, when Kate finally confronts Susan, the matriarch.
This is the big one.
It is. After years of believing she was a charity case, Kate puts her fear into words. She suggests that her success was merely a payment or a proper return on our investment for the Templeton's charity in taking her in.
This fear of transactional love was her lifelong armor. She thought if she stopped achieving, if she failed, the love would be withdrawn.
And Susan's response just utterly shatters that armor. The sources describe Susan as being genuinely furious, calling Kate's suggestion insulting, arrogant, and cruel.
A real gut punch to Kate's entire belief system. Susan asserted that their love was genuine, it was unconditional, and it was utterly disconnected from her father's financial crimes or Kate's professional status.
That emotional rupture was so necessary. Kate finally heard that love wasn't a business deal. She didn't have to keep earning her existence. And this realization, I think, it fundamentally started to chip away at the necessity of the CPA identity she had built.
It did. So with her life at Biddle temporarily shut down, she was forced into the world of Pretenses, the upscale secondhand boutique she co-owned with Laura and Margot on Cannery Row.
Right. And originally this was purely an accounting investment for her. She was a one-third partner whose role was exclusively crunching numbers.
She explicitly hated the messy details of retail, the spreadsheets, the taxes, the inventory, but she saw it as a necessary evil to support her friend's dream.
But Laura, in her pragmatic brilliance, saw the shop as necessary therapy for Kate.
Absolutely. Kate was paralyzed by stress and needed to be forced out of her own head. So Laura mandated that Kate had to clerk regularly to take pressure off Margot, who was pregnant, and simply to force Kate into a new routine. The mantra was, bend or break.
And this shift is where the magic happens. Kate discovers that the rigid CPA actually thrives in the chaos of retail.
It's amazing. Despite her initial disdain, she calls the merchandise dust catchers and admits she didn't even like jewelry, she finds she is incredibly competitive and actually enjoys the work.
We see specific anecdotes of her success, right? Winning sales contests against Margot, successfully moving items like these antique peignoirs and lamps, and really engaging with customers.
Yeah, the shop, which she had viewed as this ridiculous little side project, became a spontaneous, colorful antidote to the sterile rigidity of her life at Biddle.
And she uses it as a coping mechanism. She adopts the mantra work and don't think. The physical sensory engagement of sales and inventory, it blocked out the relentless loop of her professional fears.
She even develops this nascent aesthetic appreciation. She starts admiring the beauty of a Louis XVI thick secretary Margot sells, a pure object of elegance, utterly devoid of any quantifiable CPA value.
The shop, which started as a burden, became a training ground for her future self.
Exactly. She was starting to realize that the skills she used for rigid control focus, attention to detail, that competitive drive, could be applied to a spontaneous, joyful venture.
So, with Kate stabilized by the Templetons and distracted by pretenses, the investigation into the embezzlement could finally accelerate, though it required some strategic handling, mostly thanks to Byron De Witt.
Right. And Byron's persona is critical here because he represents everything Kate intellectually distrusts. He's the poster boy, gorgeous hotelier, embodying polite Southern wealth.
She did not like him at first.
Not at all. She initially wrote him off as an arrogant, self-important, sexist jerk. But in this crisis, she elevates him to a handler, which is a far more dangerous concept for her, linking back to her aversion to being protected or controlled.
So, how did he handle the situation strategically? What did he do?
Well, he recognized that Kate's paralysis was preventing any kind of proactive defense. So after speaking with Laura, he approached Josh, the Templeton lawyer, and he suggested they use the threat of a libel suit against Biddle for unjustified termination.
Which is a brilliant legal pressure point.
It is, but it wasn't about winning a suit. It was a strong, offensive maneuver designed to force Biddle to either produce concrete evidence or retreat, and it bought time for the police investigation to catch up.
But this absolutely destroyed Kate. She was furious, viewing it as a profound betrayal that Byron had gone over her head to Josh. She saw it as pure manipulation, a complete disregard for her agency.
Oh, she unleashed a torrent of anger on him. She called him fucking devious and a handler. What she was truly railing against was the loss of control she felt during the most vulnerable period of her life. She was still fighting that role of the helpless orphan who needs saving.
So Byron's move, while effective, it felt to her like a deliberate strategy to take over her life.
Exactly. Meanwhile, the formal police investigation was moving forward, led by Detective Cusack, a man described as having a gravelly voice, bland brown eyes, and critically, cat patience.
An expert in slow, deliberate psychological pressure.
Precisely. And Cusack was just doing his due diligence. He deliberately probed Kate's father's past, framing it as a standard background check and noting the interesting coincidence of these two financial scandals.
He was gauging her reaction.
He was. And the sources note she went sheet white. The connection between the Biddle accusation and her father's debt was the exact Achilles heel she feared most.
And it took Josh, the lawyer, intervening pretty strongly to shut down that line of questioning, which just shows how close she came to having her deepest secret exposed publicly.
But Cusack was savvy. His ultimate assessment of Kate is crucial to her innocence being proven. He noted she was very smart, driven, and ambitious. And he concluded that she wouldn't risk her entire, meticulously constructed professional life and reputation for a piddly 75 large.
He understood her motivation.
He did. He understood that her currency was prestige and control, not cash. She simply wasn't motivated by that level of financial gain. It didn't fit the profile.
So Cusack's psychological profile cleared her in his mind, but the hard forensic evidence was the definitive breakthrough.
And this evidence was secured through an act of loyalty by Marty, an associate at Biddle, who risked his own job to secretly provide copies of the forms to Byron.
Which was a huge risk for him.
A massive risk. And this is the technical heart of the resolution. Byron immediately commissioned a handwriting expert's report. And the crucial finding was this. The signatures on the altered forms were not forged.
Okay, that sounds like a small distinction, but it's vital. Why does that matter?
It's everything. A manual forgery is sloppy. It leaves traces of hesitation, pressure changes, attempts at practice. These signatures were copied or digitally duplicated.
So it points away from someone with a pen and towards someone with a computer.
Exactly. It implies a digital capture. It means the culprit had direct authorized access to Kate's computer code or her digital signature file, which she had confessed she kept, incredibly, in her bag.
Wow.
So only someone with specific internal access, familiarity with her methods, and a high level of technical access could execute the crime this way.
That immediately narrows the field dramatically. The focus turned to one person, Roger Thornhill.
Thornhill, Kate's ex-lover and a fellow Biddle associate, an equally ambitious partner-track CPA, and the same man who had previously used sex and manipulation to ruthlessly steal one of her biggest accounts.
The pattern of deceit was already there.
It was well established. So Kate takes this hard evidence and the threat of the FBI back to Biddle's office for a final cathartic confrontation with Roger.
And her strategy was brilliant.
It really was. She didn't accuse him directly of embezzlement. She just stressed that since tampering with federal tax forms was a major FBI offense, the investigation would now move from Biddle's internal affairs to a full-on federal prosecution.
And the reaction was immediate.
Instant. Roger started sweating visibly, panicking, and then tried to gaslight and threaten her, which just confirmed his guilt beyond a shadow of a doubt. The system of logic and evidence that Kate loved so much had finally delivered justice for her.
The resolution was swift after that. Cusack confirmed Thornhill was the embezzler, apparently planning a flight to Rio.
Thornhill was arrested and subsequently faced prison time and total financial ruin. Kate's name was cleared fully, professionally, and legally.
So with the crisis over, the stage was set for the expected happy ending. The professional dream Kate had spent 2 decades chasing was instantly handed to her on a silver platter.
Yeah. Mr. Biddle, desperate to contain the scandal and apologize for their regret for your involvement in this police matter, personally offered her a full partnership.
The thing she wanted more than anything.
The thing she thought she wanted. And her initial reaction confirms just how deeply rooted this ambition was. She felt pure, unadulterated joy. The documents describe her as dazzled, feeling like being cut from the minors, then being signed to bat cleanup for the Yankees Braves.
That's a great quote.
It is. This partnership was the proof. It was the ultimate external validation, the final stamp that she had earned her place and deserved the Templetons' love.
She initially thought, this is it, I've erased the taint, I've proven myself.
But the crisis forced her to take a crucial step. Time. She didn't accept immediately. She realized she needed a moment to truly think, which, for someone whose life was rigidly planned years in advance, was a profound shift in methodology.
She was finally listening to her gut, not her ambition.
She was. And this leads to the moment of profound clarity and the great professional pivot, the moment that defines her entire transformation. When she finally sits across from Mr. Biddle again, she turns down the partnership.
Which must have shocked him.
It shocked him, and it probably surprised the woman she used to be. And the reason isn't just that she found the shop fun. The deeper realization was that the Biddle life, the rigid silence, the working under artificial light, the constant low-grade stress of chasing prestige was no longer rewarding. More than boring, it had become toxic to her.
The crisis severed the link between her self-worth and that kind of external validation. The partnership, which was supposed to confirm her superiority to her father's failure, now just looked like a cage.
It did. She realized she was genuinely happy running a secondhand shop on Cannery Row, enjoying the spontaneity, the magical little treasure chest filled with the sublime and the foolish, and, most importantly, the shared ownership forged from genuine, non-transactional friendship.
She understands that her MBA and her CPA skills aren't wasted.
Not at all. She's simply using them in a different way, as a partner in her own risky venture, Pretenses. She shifted from using her intelligence to uphold an illusion of control to using it to create something she actually loved. The ambition remained, but the motivation shifted from reactionary shame to internal desire.
Now, with her professional life in transformation, her personal life just explodes in one final burst of high-stakes drama with Byron De Witt.
Of course it does. Byron decides to make his move, but he does it in the most calculated, managerial way possible.
He can't help himself.
He really can't. He casually delivers a marriage proposal right alongside a discussion about scheduling a Thanksgiving trip to Atlanta to meet his family. He treated the proposal like item number 2 on a meeting agenda.
And this casual delivery just ignited all of Kate's unresolved issues about being handled.
Oh, she explodes. This argument is the necessary climax to her rejection of the controlled life. She accuses him of being a handler, canny, and fucking devious, and she details every single maneuver he made to integrate himself into her life.
She lays it all out.
She lists the physical evidence of his subtle manipulation. Buying the puppies, nip and tuck without asking her, tuning her car without telling her, easing her into living with him, and even using incredible sex as a way to soften her defenses. She sees his protection as paternalism, a threat to her hard-won independence.
This is where Byron, the man who plans things out, refuses to back down. He doesn't apologize for his nature.
He doesn't. He admits it. He says, I do plan things out. It's in my nature to protect, to fix. But he asserts his love is genuine, and he challenges her to accept him as he is. And then he forces a temporary painful break. He tells her to collect her things. He won't be manipulated by her need for control via anger.
This forced separation is Kate's final crucible. Without the armor of her CPA identity or the distraction of the shop, she is forced to confront her feelings for Byron outside the context of anger or control.
And she realizes she can't fight her feelings or his nature. She returns to him, accepting his protective, handling nature, not because she needs to be saved anymore, but because she loves him. She accepts her own vulnerability.
And Byron confirms his commitment, stating he wants to marry her, but he also makes this really important reciprocal demand. He wants to be taken care of in return.
Yes, welcoming her home into his house. It's an acceptance of partnership, not of control.
And we end on this beautiful symbolic note involving the Serafino treasure hunt.
Yes, the local legend centers on Serafina, this star-crossed Spanish girl, who supposedly hid her dowry treasure on the cliffs near Templeton House before jumping to her death. And Kate and her friends, they often search the area. It's a hobby, a physical manifestation of seeking the unexpected.
After her cathartic confrontations turning down Biddle and facing her aunt about her father's history, Kate walks those cliffs again, fully embodying her new, chosen identity.
And she finds it. Not by digging, not through forced effort, but by pure chance. An 1845 Spanish gold doubloon simply lying there, out in the open.
Wow.
This small, tangible piece of treasure arrives precisely when she has stopped digging for validation and accepted her true worth. It symbolizes that fortune, prosperity, and hope are now in her path, without the frantic, exhaustive effort she previously associated with success.
It's an affirmation of her new, less rigid life.
It is. Kate Powell's journey from CPA partner track to boutique owner is a profound case study in how a crisis can redefine success, forcing a high achiever to abandon a life built on reactionary shame.
So first, the key psychological takeaway for me is that personal identity cannot be defined by external markers of professional status or inherited family shame. Kate had spent decades trying to use success to distance herself from her father's failure, but the ultimate vindication was choosing happiness and accepting unconditional love.
She realized that the partnership she coveted was actually psychologically toxic because it was driven by the ghost of her father, not by her own genuine passion.
Exactly. Second, the trauma of being falsely framed forced her to address her severe physical symptoms, that gnawing ulcer, and just slow down.
She learned that self-care and vulnerability were not weaknesses. They were necessary components of a sustainable life. She had to learn that it was okay to be protected and loved, even when she expected it to be a transaction.
And finally, true fulfillment often means choosing the spontaneous, risky path, the boutique, over the logical, rigid, expected path of the corporate ladder. She traded the silence and artificial light of Biddle for the chaos and color of Cannery Row, proving that applying your intelligence to things that bring you joy is the ultimate form of personal success.
The irony is just so perfect. Kate was terrified that professional perfection was the only way to avoid being her father's daughter. But in the end, she realized that forgiveness of his mistake, acceptance of her own vulnerabilities, and choosing intrinsic happiness over external prestige was the truest measure of her unique character.
That leaves us with a provocative thought for you to take away. Kate Powell found her buried treasure, that gold doubloon, only when she stopped frantically searching for it. So how often do we, in our own lives, chase an outcome, like a title, a salary, or a specific prestige, simply to prove something to a past failure or a lingering insecurity, instead of listening to our gut and choosing the path that truly brings us joy? Are we chasing validation, or are we chasing the equivalent of selling beautiful dust catchers?